When we align with love, doors open, not just metaphorically, but in a tangible, deeply transformative way that influences every facet of our lives. Love, in its purest form, is a frequency, a state of being that transcends the transactional emotions we often attach to it. When we speak of aligning with love, we are not referring merely to romantic love or familial affection, but to an all-encompassing energy of compassion, connection, authenticity, and presence. This alignment is both a spiritual and practical stance from which we experience the world, not through fear or control, but through trust, empathy, and truth. In doing so, something remarkable happens. The world begins to respond in kind. People, situations, and opportunities shift, often in ways that seem miraculous or coincidental, but are in fact reflections of our inner realignment. Aligning with love begins on the inside. It is a conscious choice to tune into a deeper version of ourselves, a version that is not governed by ego or scarcity, but by abundance and interconnection. Many of us walk through life operating from a place of fear, often unconsciously. We fear rejection, loss, failure, or vulnerability, and this fear shapes our decisions, limits our creativity, and stifles our joy. When we align with love, however, we begin to dismantle those internal barricades. We allow ourselves to see through the lens of compassion rather than judgment. This means not only extending love outward, but also inward, treating ourselves with the same kindness, patience, and understanding that we are often quicker to offer others. As this inner shift takes place, our energy changes. We become more receptive, open-hearted, and grounded. Others can feel this, even if they can't articulate it. The warmth and presence of someone aligned with love can transform a room, a conversation, even a conflict. This energy draws people in, not because it demands attention, but because it offers a rare space of authenticity and safety. And so, without forcing or strategizing, doors begin to open, new relationships are formed, old wounds begin to heal, and creative pathways reveal themselves. In the workplace, aligning with love might look like choosing integrity over manipulation, collaboration over competition, and generosity over scarcity. While these choices may seem soft or even risky in environments dominated by performance metrics and hierarchical structures, they often yield surprising results. Teams function more effectively when members feel seen and valued. Innovation thrives in environments of trust. Leaders who prioritize empathy foster loyalty and resilience. Love in leadership isn't weakness, it's clarity, courage, and long-term vision. In our personal lives, the shift is even more immediate. When we bring love into our relationships, romantic, platonic, or familial, we create space for real connection. We stop trying to change or fix others and begin to accept them as they are, which ironically invites them into growth far more powerfully than criticism ever could. Conflicts are navigated not with the intent to win, but to understand. Vulnerability becomes a bridge instead of a barrier. And in this space of mutual respect and care, relationships deepen and flourish. On a broader societal level, aligning with love invites us to examine the systems we participate in and support. It challenges us to ask whether our actions contribute to healing or harm. It inspires social change rooted not in outrage alone, but in compassion, equity, and vision. Movements driven by love have historically been among the most enduring and effective. They see beyond the illusion of separation and invite all parties to step into shared humanity. Love fuels justice because it recognizes that no one is free while another is oppressed. It fuels sustainability because it sees the earth not as a resource to be exploited, but as a living system to be respected and nurtured. One of the most profound aspects of aligning with love is the shift in perception that occurs. Life begins to feel less like something that is happening to us and more like something that is unfolding with us. Challenges are no longer simply obstacles, but invitations to grow. Pain isn't dismissed or bypassed. It is held with tenderness, understood as a teacher. Gratitude becomes more accessible, not because everything is perfect, but because we are more present, more attuned to beauty, and less consumed by the noise of comparison or ambition. There's also a natural expansion that comes with aligning with love. As fear loosens its grip, we begin to say yes to life in fuller, bolder ways. We step into our purpose, not from a need to prove ourselves, but from a desire to serve, to create, to contribute. This doesn't mean life becomes easy or that suffering disappears, but we meet life differently. We become more resilient, not because we avoid pain, but because we carry a deeper sense of connection and meaning. One might wonder how to align with love in a world that often seems fractured, cynical, or even hostile. The truth is, alignment is not a one-time event. It is a continual practice. It requires discernment, courage, and the humility to return again and again to the heart, especially when we stray. It means choosing presence when it would be easier to numb out. It means choosing to listen when it would be easier to defend. It means choosing to forgive, not because others always deserve it, but because we deserve peace. These are not easy choices, but they are powerful ones. And each time we make them, we strengthen the neural, emotional, and spiritual pathways that keep us grounded in love. Love, in its essence, is not passive. It is not just a feeling, but an action, a stance, a commitment. It is showing up when it's hard, speaking truth with kindness, holding boundaries with care, and choosing growth over comfort. It is expansive and contagious. When we align with it, we become catalysts for change, not by pushing or preaching, but by embodying the very values we wish to see in the world. This embodiment sends ripples out in ways we may never fully see or understand, but that matter profoundly. There is also a mysterious aspect to this alignment. When we operate from love, synchronicities tend to increase. We meet the right people at the right time. Ideas seem to arrive with perfect timing. Projects unfold with surprising ease. It may feel like magic, but it is more accurate to say that love puts us in harmony with a deeper order, a kind of universal intelligence that supports growth, healing, and connection. We begin to notice that life has its own rhythm, and when we stop resisting and start aligning, we are carried by that rhythm rather than dragged by it. This doesn't mean we avoid action or responsibility. In fact, aligning with love often calls us into greater responsibility, not out of obligation, but out of devotion. It calls us to use our gifts, to speak out against injustice, to care for the vulnerable, to live in a way that honors both our individuality and our interconnectedness. It is a path of active engagement, not passive observation. Yet the energy behind this engagement is different. It is not driven by urgency or panic, but by clarity and grounded purpose. The paradox is that when we align with love, we become more ourselves, not the masked or performative self, but the true self that has been quietly waiting beneath the layers of fear, conditioning, and expectation. We begin to express more freely, to connect more deeply, and to contribute more meaningfully. This authenticity is magnetic. It draws people and experiences to us that are in resonance with our true frequency, not the version we once projected to feel accepted or safe. And in that resonance, life feels more alive. Colors are brighter, conversations are richer, silence becomes more peaceful rather than empty or awkward. There is a quiet confidence that replaces the need for external validation. We become more attuned to the small miracles of everyday life. A kind gesture from a stranger, the beauty of a tree against the sky, the way music can move us to tears. These moments are not trivial. They are reminders that love is not just an idea, but a lived experience, available to us in every moment we choose to return to it. Ultimately, aligning with love changes everything, not because it changes the world around us in an instant, but because it changes the way we see, engage with, and respond to that world. It transforms the mundane into the meaningful, the painful into the sacred, and the uncertain into the possible. This transformation that begins within does not stop at the boundaries of our own life. Love, when truly aligned with, becomes expansive. It reaches beyond our individual experiences and begins to touch the collective. We influence others not by forcing them to change, but by being an example of what is possible when one lives from the heart. The ripple effects of this kind of embodiment are far-reaching. A single act of compassion can alter someone's day, their trajectory, or even their perspective on life. And when these acts compound, when communities begin to align with love, the entire culture begins to shift. What was once normalized as apathy, division, or aggression becomes less tolerable. Kindness becomes the standard, not the exception. This is not idealistic, it is deeply pragmatic. Humanity's most profound breakthroughs have been grounded in love. Think of the teachers, healers, leaders, and everyday people whose lives have been dedicated to service, to justice, to truth, not because it was easy, but because they were aligned with something greater than themselves. They operated from love even in the face of adversity. Love was the fuel that allowed them to persevere, to speak when it was dangerous, to act when it was unpopular, and to forgive when it seemed impossible. Aligning with love, then, is not retreating from the harshness of life, but rising up to meet it with clarity and courage. In practical terms, this alignment can influence the smallest choices we make, how we speak to a cashier, how we treat our coworkers, how we respond to a friend in need. These decisions, seemingly mundane, are actually opportunities. In every interaction, we have a choice to come from fear or from love. Fear closes, love opens. Fear blames, love understands. Fear isolates, love connects. And each time we choose love, we reinforce a new pattern within ourselves and contribute to a new pattern in the collective consciousness. There are moments, of course, when aligning with love is hard. Times when the weight of grief, injustice, betrayal, or uncertainty feels unbearable. Love does not ask us to deny those experiences. It asks us to stay present within them, to allow our hearts to break open rather than shut down, to feel the pain fully, but not let it harden us. This is one of love's most radical teachings, that we can remain open, even in the face of suffering, that our tenderness is not a liability, but a strength. It is in these moments that the alignment becomes most meaningful. When we choose love not because it is easy, but because it is right, this ongoing choice to return to love again and again is a form of spiritual discipline. It is the essence of most sacred teachings across traditions and cultures. Whether it is expressed as compassion in Buddhism, agape in Christianity, loving kindness in Hinduism, or mercy in Islam, the message is clear: love is the highest path. It is the universal language that transcends doctrine, dogma, and division. And when we align with it, we tap into a source of wisdom and strength far greater than our limited perspective. The paradox is that aligning with love often means relinquishing control. It means surrendering the illusion that we can predict or manipulate outcomes. Love operates in the present, not the hypothetical future. It asks us to show up fully, to give without guarantee, to trust without certainty. This kind of surrender can be terrifying for the mind, which craves safety through control, but it is liberating for the soul. It is in this surrender that we find true power, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that creates. Not the kind that conquers, but the kind that heals. Relationships, too, are transformed when love becomes the foundation. We begin to relate not from need or lack, but from wholeness. We stop looking for others to complete us and instead seek to share ourselves fully. This does not mean every relationship becomes effortless or permanent. In fact, some relationships may fall away when we align more deeply with love, especially if they were based on codependence, manipulation, or unresolved wounds. But the relationships that remain, or the new ones that emerge, tend to be more nourishing, honest, and aligned. They support our growth rather than diminish our light. Love also deepens our connection to the natural world. When we are aligned with love, we begin to see the sacred in all things: the trees, the rivers, the animals, the sky. We remember that we are not separate from nature, but a part of it. This shift in awareness inspires stewardship rather than exploitation. We no longer view the earth as a backdrop for our ambitions, but as a living, breathing entity deserving of care and reverence. Our choices around consumption, sustainability, and ecology begin to change, not out of guilt or fear, but out of love for the planet that sustains us. Creativity, too, is enhanced when we align with love. Love frees us from the self-judgment and comparison that so often block our creative expression. When we create from love, we are not trying to impress or compete. We are simply expressing what is true and beautiful to us. This kind of expression is magnetic. It resonates with others because it carries the frequency of authenticity. Whether it's writing, painting, singing, building, designing, or dreaming, love infuses our work with vitality and purpose. We stop asking, will they like it? And begin asking, is this true to who I am? Even our physical health can be influenced by this alignment. Studies in psychoneuroimmunology and holistic medicine have shown that love, through positive relationships, mindfulness, and emotional well-being, can boost immune function, reduce stress hormones, and the body responds to love just as the spirit does. While it is not a cure, it is undeniably a force for vitality. When we hold ourselves and others in love, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, moving from fight or flight into rest and digest. We sleep better, digest more efficiently, and recover more quickly. Our bodies, like our lives, thrive in the presence of love. And what of the unknown, the future, the path ahead that none of us can predict? Aligning with love does not remove uncertainty, but it does change how we relate to it. We become less attached to outcomes and more committed to values. We learn to walk forward not with rigid plans, but with open hearts. We trust that love will guide us, not as a fixed map, but as a compass pointing to what is most aligned. This trust is not non-event, it is born of experience. Each time we follow love, we see how it leads us somewhere meaningful, even if it's not where we thought we were going. It teaches us that peace is not the absence of challenge, but the presence of alignment. And so, life becomes a kind of ongoing dance with love, a returning, a remembering, a recentering. We become more discerning in our choices, more intentional with our energy, more devoted in our relationships. We begin to sense the subtle cues of the heart, to hear the quiet whispers of intuition, and to trust those more than the noise of fear or external approval. We begin to live in harmony with ourselves and with the world around us. And in that harmony, something extraordinary unfolds. In that harmony, we begin to witness a deeper intelligence at work, not one defined by logic alone, but by resonance, timing, and truth. Life begins to feel orchestrated, not in the sense that we are passive participants in a predestined plan, but rather as co-creators in a living, breathing, dynamic flow. When we are aligned with love, we are no longer pushing upstream. We move in rhythm with something ancient, something sacred. Our steps become surer, even if the path ahead is obscured, because we're no longer walking alone. Love walks with us, through us, as us. This shift in perception is not about denial or delusion. It's not about pretending that life is always beautiful or that pain doesn't exist. It's about seeing clearly, so clearly, in fact, that we no longer reduce people to their mistakes, reduce situations to their difficulties, or reduce ourselves to our flaws. Love gives us the lens of wholeness. Through it, we see complexity, nuance, and possibility. We see those layered situations as unfolding and ourselves as evolving. We allow grace to enter, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. The more we align with love, the more we develop emotional resilience. We stop reacting to life from old wounds and start responding from present awareness. We pause before we lash out. We breathe before we assume. We reflect before we judge. This doesn't mean we suppress our emotions. On the contrary, love invites us to feel everything more deeply, but it changes our relationship to those emotions. Anger becomes a messenger, not a weapon. Sadness becomes a doorway, not a dead end. Joy becomes a celebration, not a fleeting high. Each emotion becomes a teacher, guiding us back to our center. When we live this way, grounded in love, present in our choices, aware of our impact, something remarkable begins to happen. We start to trust ourselves. Not the version of ourselves curated for approval or success, but the real one, the one that's raw, curious, wounded, wise. This trust is foundational. Without it, we are constantly looking outside for validation, guidance, or worth. With it, we are anchored no matter how the winds of life shift. We can listen to others without losing ourselves. We can take risks without needing guarantees. We can forgive ourselves for being human, and in doing so, grant that same forgiveness to others. This is the essence of sovereignty, not dominance or isolation, but self-responsibility rooted in love. To be sovereign is to know who you are, and to act from that knowing with humility and care. It is to be able to say no without guilt, yes without people pleasing, and maybe without fear of judgment. It is to own your story, including the chapters that haven't been edited or polished, and to stand in your truth without needing it to be universally accepted. When we align with love, sovereignty becomes natural. We are no longer shaped primarily by others' opinions or expectations. We become steady within ourselves and generous with others. One of the greatest gifts of living in love is the restoration of joy. Not superficial happiness, but real, soul, deep joy that doesn't depend on external conditions. Joy that exists simply because we are alive, connected, aware. This joy bubbles up in unexpected moments, watching the light shift through trees, laughing with someone we love, helping a stranger, dancing to music that stirs something ancient inside us. These moments remind us that life is not a problem to be solved, but an experience to be lived. They remind us that we don't need to wait for everything to be perfect to feel grateful, inspired, or at peace. We also begin to understand that love isn't something we give to get. It's something we become. We stop measuring our worth by how much love we receive and begin to focus on how much love we radiate. This shift dismantles so many of the painful dynamics we've learned from society, the need to perform, to prove, to compete. Love doesn't operate in scarcity. It is abundant by nature. The more we give it, the more it flows. The more we embody it, the more it shapes our reality. And as we become more aligned with it, we notice that what once felt like sacrifice now feels like service. What once felt like effort now feels like devotion. Even in the face of collective pain, war, injustice, ecological destruction, love remains the most powerful response, not because it fixes everything overnight, but because it refuses to collapse. It refuses to hate what it doesn't understand. It refuses to numb out or look away. It stays awake, aware, engaged. Love in these contexts looks like protest, art, healing, education, and advocacy. It looks like people coming together not just to share outrage, but to build new systems rooted in compassion, equity, and truth. When we align with love on a collective level, we stop perpetuating cycles of harm and begin generating cycles of healing. Love also teaches us to listen deeply and without agenda. To listen not just with our ears, but with our hearts. To hear what isn't being said. To feel the emotion beneath the words. This kind of listening is rare, but it's one of the most healing gifts we can offer. It tells people they are seen, that their truth matters, that their presence matters. In a world full of noise, this kind of quiet attention is revolutionary. It cuts through defensiveness, it builds bridges, it transforms relationships. As we continue to align with love, we may find that our definitions of success begin to change. No longer rooted in metrics or milestones alone, success becomes about impact, alignment, integrity. It becomes less about what we accumulate and more about what we contribute. We begin to ask ourselves not just, what can I get from life, but what can I give to life? This reorientation brings meaning to even the most mundane tasks. Washing dishes, answering emails, walking the dog, all become opportunities to show up with love, to be present, to infuse the ordinary with sacred attention. And as we do this, something inside us softens and strengthens at once. We are no longer brittle or guarded. We become supple, open, alive. Life moves through us more freely. Creativity flows, intuition sharpens, and time itself seems to stretch. We begin to live from a place that is deeply rooted, yet wildly free, a paradox only love can hold. This freedom is not reckless but responsible. It does not flee from commitment, it deepens it. It does not avoid discomfort, it walks through it with grace. It does not need to control, it chooses to trust. This trust becomes the foundation for everything else. It allows us to take leaps of faith, to love without guarantees, to speak truth even when our voice shakes. We stop racing against life and begin dancing with it. We learn to rest, not just in body, but in spirit. We learn to ask for help without shame. We learn to hold both joy and sorrow in the same breath. We become not perfect, but whole. And in that wholeness, we find that love is not something we visit occasionally. It is the very ground we walk on, the breath we take, the essence we return to again and again with every heartbeat. With every heartbeat, love reminds us that we belong, not just to each other, but to life itself. It tells us we are not separate, no matter how fiercely we may sometimes feel alone. This sense of belonging isn't conditional. It doesn't require us to be flawless or constantly productive. It exists simply because we are. Aligning with love helps us remember this fundamental truth: we are already worthy. This remembrance begins to dissolve the deep-rooted shame that so many of us carry. Shame that tells us we must earn love, prove ourselves, or hide who we really are. When love becomes the root from which we grow, the entire architecture of our lives begins to shift. Our goals become more aligned with our values. Our routines reflect what nourishes us rather than what depletes us. Our ambitions are no longer driven by comparison or insecurity, but by inspiration and service. Even failure begins to take on new meaning. When we align with love, failure isn't a sign that we are broken or behind. It's a sign that we dared to try, that we were brave enough to care, that we are still growing. And growth in this context is not linear or mechanical. It is organic, sometimes messy, often surprising, but always meaningful. There is a quiet steadiness that comes from living in alignment with love. This steadiness is not loud or performative. It's the kind of strength that can sit in silence with someone's grief without needing to fix it. It's the kind of clarity that allows us to say no, not from anger, but from self-respect. It's the kind of presence that can recognize pain in someone's voice and meet it with gentleness rather than judgment. This kind of inner grounding becomes an offering in a world that often feels chaotic and unmoored. We become a place where others can rest, not because we have all the answers, but because we are willing to meet life with our whole heart. This is also where healing happens. Deep, sustainable healing. Not the kind that glosses over the wounds, but the kind that sits with them, learns from them, and slowly alchemizes them into wisdom. Aligning with love doesn't mean we never hurt again, but it does mean we stop hurting ourselves the same way over and over. We become more attuned to the stories we've inherited or internalized, the ones that told us we were too much or not enough, that we had to earn love or shrink ourselves to be safe. Love exposes these stories not to shame us, but to liberate us. It invites us to write new ones, to reclaim the pen, to become the authors of our own becoming. As we do this, we realize that love has been with us all along, not just in the obvious moments of affection or kindness, but in the quiet ones too. In the way a friend remembered our favorite song, in the softness of a morning light, in the resilience we showed even when no one was watching. Love is woven into the fabric of life, often in places we least expect. When we align with it, we begin to notice these threads. We begin to see how nothing is wasted, how even the hardest moments contain seeds of insight and transformation. We begin to feel connected to something greater than ourselves, not in a grandiose, abstract way, but in a deeply embodied, personal way. This connection doesn't require us to abandon our individuality. Rather, it invites us to express it more fully, knowing that our uniqueness is part of the greater whole. The fear that often holds us back begins to dissolve in this space. not all at once and not without effort, but gradually, gently. We begin to trust that we can take risks without losing ourselves, that we can be open without being destroyed, that we can be seen without being rejected. Each time we act from love, we gather evidence that supports this trust. And over time, that evidence becomes a foundation, a new baseline from which we move through life. Instead of reacting from old wounds, we begin responding from new awareness. This shift in response has a profound impact on the people around us. When we show up from love, we model what's possible. We give others permission to do the same. We normalize honesty. We normalize emotional literacy. We normalize asking for help. We normalize taking responsibility. This modeling isn't about being perfect. It's about being real. It's about showing that love isn't a destination we arrive at when everything is fixed, but a path we walk even when everything feels uncertain. In walking that path, we also learn the art of allowing. We stop trying to force life to conform to our expectations and begin to open to what is, trusting that even what we don't yet understand may hold meaning. This doesn't mean we become passive. It means we become receptive. We learn to listen more than we speak. We learn to soften more than we brace. We learn to trust the unfolding, even when it doesn't match our timelines. And in that trust, we discover a new kind of freedom, the freedom to be fully alive, fully present, fully ourselves. As we deepen into this alignment, we start to feel a kind of inner spaciousness, a sense that there's room for all of it, the joy and the sorrow, the knowing and the confusion, the becoming and the unbecoming. We stop needing to label everything as good or bad, right or wrong. We become curious instead of critical, compassionate instead of reactive. This spaciousness allows us to hold others more gently too. We stop demanding perfection from them. We stop needing them to fit our idea of who they should be. We begin to love them where they are, not where we wish they would be. And that kind of love is transformative, not just for them, but for us. The more we embody love, the more it becomes our natural way of being. We don't have to force it or fabricate it. It flows because it's rooted in something true. And when we inevitably fall out of alignment, as we all do, we return with more grace, less shame. We recognize the signs sooner. We listen to the whispers before they become screams. We take care of ourselves not from vanity, but from reverence. We set boundaries not from fear, but from clarity. We rest not because we've earned it, but because we are worthy of it. And slowly, this becomes our way of life, not a performance, not a philosophy, but a living, breathing practice, a devotion, a way of being that honors both the sacredness of the everyday and the divinity within us all.